You're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Today on the show, misconceptions.
Life, the Universe, and Everything Else explores the intersection of science and society. Our music is produced by Ian James, and the show is edited by E.A. Moon.
I'm Lauren Bailey, and with me today I have Laura Creek-Newman.
Hi there.
Jem Newman.
Hello.
And Ashlyn Noble.
Hello.
I didn't really have an intro written for this, so we're just going to get right into it. Our misconceptions today include corsetry, crotches, Canada, and cast iron. All right, Laura, can you tell us about some corsetry and what people don't know or think they know?
Sure. Well, I was curious what you all think of when you think of corsets. And I'm looking across the table at you two who know a lot more about sewing and costuming and such than I do. But just thinking about what comes to mind when we think of corsets, especially how they were, how they affected the wearer, and whatnot.
Well, what period are we talking? Are we talking Elizabethan bodies, or are we talking 18th century semi-tight lacing, or are we talking television super tight lacing?
Oh, Lauren.
I'm very happy
to
generalize.
Yes, let's go general and then we'll narrow down.
Corsetry sort of evolved as a way to shape the body and had sort of some supportive benefits as a side thing, but it was fashion combined with making sure everything stayed in the right places and somewhat so that it could... Fashion was always intended to encumber women in very specific ways. And so corsetry for the higher classes has always been much more confining than those for like washerwomen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm curious about Jem's thoughts on this as the person least likely around the table to encounter a corset in their daily wear.
You're right, we have been married a long time.
No, we are going right past that, and you are just going to answer my question.
Yeah, I don't know, like putting the person who obviously knows least about this last seems kind of unfair.
Well, I didn't mean for that. I was just what comes to mind? Like, we're talking misconceptions, too,
sure.
So.
Extremely tight lacing, very sort of hourglass figure, something that is very uncomfortable. And I don't know, like, you know that cartoon wolf whose like eyes bug out and then his tongue rolls down? You know that.
A thing that evokes that face.
Right.
Yes. I think, yeah, those are the tropes that are out there. And so for those of us who only really know corsets from media or from especially historical fiction, that's probably our best guess around these things. And they're not entirely wrong, but there is a lot of misconceptions around the idea behind corsets. And as Lauren kind of alluded to, there's a corset isn't just a corset. There's a lot of types of corsets too. And there's a lot of ways of wearing them. And there's a lot of purposes for them, like Ashlyn was saying. So the idea that all corsets are super stiff, they are pulled as tightly as humanly possible, basically so that the wearer can't breathe and is about to faint. The belief that wearing them this way is going to cause all sorts of internal damage and shorten a wearer's lifespan and is meant to be super restrictive. Like that did happen, but that wasn't the goal of all corsets. And I think that's something that if you want to look into it, you can now. There's a whole TikTok and Instagram and YouTube thing about corsetry and that. So you can learn a lot more than I'm going to talk about today. But I wanted to talk about that, just that image that a lot of people have is not really real. No one really wore them that way most of the time. So as Ashlyn, you were saying, yeah, corsets were a supportive garment in many ways. Modesty was a big part of them as well, too, partly because they kind of cover the torso in in lots of ways. I don't really get the modesty thing, but it came up a lot in the research. So there was, and again, ideas of modesty change over time and what types of undergarments are appropriate. So, but it was a supportive garment. It was supportive both for the person's physicality and especially like for people with breasts, it helps with that because bras were not a thing. And so it was very helpful for people. It was also supportive for the clothing that they wore. Because if ever you watch those videos of a Victorian woman getting dressed under her 17 layers of clothing that each weighed like 5 kilos, having that stiff garment, actually, it helped support the weight of the clothes. So it's not just the person's body, but the weight of the clothes. And that's the piece that I think doesn't get factored in for a lot of people when they think about that, especially because the types of clothing that most of us wear today don't require anything like that.
Having worn Elizabethan garments. Well,
You have?
yeah, I did an Elizabethan for one event. Of course, it felt good. It was before you, a long time ago.
Yeah.
I borrowed it.
If you try and put on one of those gowns without the right undergarments, it just doesn't work.
It looks saggy and baggy and
Yeah, like the gowns were built for that shape. Like the two things had to be used together. Like it doesn't work. It won't fit. It will be painful. It will be like just really, really uncomfortable.
And I think that's a big part of the modesty thing that maybe you missed, that if you didn't have those undergarments on, then you would look immodest and slovenly.
yeah.
Could be. Yeah. So another thing too is, again, a lot of us forget that when corsets first became popular, they were all tailor-made.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the vast majority of undergarments today, most people will never wear an undergarment that's perfectly fit to their body and dimensions. Corsets were, and they were meant to be. And so if your corset did not fit well, it wasn't tailored to your body. So the idea of like just putting on this hard thing and you squeezing into it, which is very much a modern way of thinking with industrial clothing and so forth, that wouldn't be the case in corsets. Not to say that they weren't stiff or anything, but they were measured to you. They were measured to you. And so that's something to think about as well. So if you put on your friend's corset, which you shouldn't because that's gross, but like if you did, it probably wouldn't fit right because you're shaped differently.
Yeah. And the stays back then there was reed ones or bone ones.
Yeah.
The reed ones would move more. And now they're basically plastic zip ties or metal.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of the boning pieces, that like the really stiff pieces, were actually still forgiving and flexible, in not fully flexible, but they were. So they weren't meant to keep you rigid like a solid object or something and totally restrict. There was some restriction, like bending at the waist has always been hard in a corset, but it wasn't meant to start hampering you. And Ashlyn, like you'd said, it started with the upper classes. They really took it on. But by the 18th and 19th centuries, everybody was wearing them.
Well, and I was also going to say it's kind of like the frog in a hot water analogy, where they started out as sort of less scary and got more and more elaborate, much like the gowns that went on top of them.
Yeah. And it wasn't so the idea of the tight lacing that, Lauren, you brought up, and that we think of like when I've been rewatching Bridgerton, and so there's the scenes of like them getting pulled so that they're going to snap or something. That didn't really start until after 1820 because of the invention of, do you know what?
Probably not.
Metal eyelets.
Oh, yeah.
Because typically, like if you pulled too hard, then the corset would break, the strings would snap, something like that. But the metal eyelets allowed for pulling tighter, and that's when tight fitting corsets and tight fit pulling really took off for people. And so it was in that period between like the mid 1800s to the early 1900s that we see most of the really tight corsets. Again, this was not for everyday wear. It was more for like the fancier gowns or trying to outdo each other or something. But people going about their lives wouldn't wear that from the morning onwards. It was never expected in that way. It was a weird thing, kind of like we see strange things that people put on for the Met Gala at night. They're not going to go about that in their everyday life, but they are going to wear that for a short period of time. So that's something to keep in mind too, that was never the point. the whole time around. Yeah. The other thing too is that another misconception is that it was meant to be painful and restrictive. Again, if it was painful, like really painful, there was a problem with it. You weren't wearing it right. Just like right now, if you're wearing a bra that's really terribly painful, it probably doesn't fit you right.
Yeah.
I think them being uncomfortable in general is a misconception. If you are wearing one that fits you properly, especially if you are someone who has a weirdly shaped back, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Like you can relax.
You enjoy your corsetry.
Yeah, like there's for some people especially, like it can be a source of support. And so there was different camps, of course. Some physicians were like, oh no, corsets are all terrible for you, and they were blamed on a whole bunch of health issues in women. No good evidence for most of these. Or if you were doing the really tight wearing of the corsets, yeah, that's a problem, but just loosen it. Just don't do that. It's not the corset itself. It's the, like, you're using the tool wrong. Don't use it wrong.
You're doing it wrong.
I'll make this rope so tight, you won't be able to move.
And some people would say, oh, it weakens the back muscles. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Again, that was more so in, like, the really tight fitting
The Scarlett
corsets.
O'Hara.
Yeah, but then if you were wearing it as it should be, snug, but not overly restrictive, you shouldn't have a problem with that. And also, if you're someone who does a lot of heavy lifting or who has a back injury or just scoliosis was a common one for a lot of people too, having that extra external support can be really helpful. And we still use those kinds of things
it's like a back
all
brace.
the time.
Bodybuilder
for
belts.
people. Exactly, right? You think of that, like if you're, or somebody who works in a warehouse, they're going to wear that kind of thing too. Corsets would serve that function pretty easily. And working women in the late 19th century were lifting heavy stuff. So it's probably protective in a way. Now, that being said, not all corsets were created equal. There is a style that is pretty bad for you, and it was the Edwardian corset.
Yeah, because it has the big in and then the hips, right?
So what's actually really different about that is that the corsets that we think of from Elizabethan period up until the late 19th century, they really compressed at the waist, like right under the rib cage. But what their real job was, they kind of like pushed any squidgy stuff down that got hidden under the poofy skirt. So they just kind of like pushed your muffin top further down, right? So your waist, which was actually really high, was small. That was the point of them. But they left your posture alone with that. So they were like compressing around, but they weren't moving your hips or anything like that. The Edwardian one, and the way that they did that, if you ever see the corsets, they kind of like, you guys can see my hands, but like they bow out at the front at the lower abdomen. So they're the smallest right at the bottom of the rib cage, and then they bow out, right? To allow for the squidgy stuff to move. The Edwardian ones, though, had a very long, straight torso. And that went down like past the lower abdomen down to the pubic area. Yeah. And so what that would do is it would force you to push your chest out and to push your butt out as well, to have like a long, straight torso. But that is exacerbating the curve in the lower back there. So that is actually, this was marketed as the newer, better form. Really, it was just to fit the fashions of the time and to leave the outdated big full bell skirts behind and to accommodate more of like a bustle skirt. And those ones, if you wear those a lot, especially tight, will kill your back. So don't wear those ones a lot. Be very, very cautious with that. But the kind that were used for a couple hundred years were actually a lot more aligned with things. Yeah. And as for the internal organ damage and that, we do have some evidence from skeletons that people who wore corsets from the time that they were very young, that their bones were still growing, that they do have longer rib cages, and the bones are, rather than wider rib cages, they have longer rib cages.
But skeletons also show evidence of, like, being a cobbler.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or an archer, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. And there has been some research done to say, too, that even though we see these changes, these women are older than the average woman and such. And so they lived...
They're probably
their life wasn't shortened because of this, which if you would think, well, this compression, this deformation is so terrible that it's causing all this problem with internal organs, then theoretically, even if they're rich women, they shouldn't live that long because it should be so dangerous. So the two things don't equate 1-to-1 with that. So that's something to think about, that it's not necessarily true. And there's a lot of like, oh, well, it caused all the gynecological problems or the miscarriages and that. It's like, also water quality was bad and cities were new and terrible. And
Everybody had lead poisoning.
everybody had lead poisoning. I was like, you think, but it's only the corsets again. So it's a lot of social things that get brought down onto this one thing, usually a thing that is only something that women use and sometimes that they like. Like, a lot of women liked the corsets, and some of them found like it was a way that they like to express themselves with the fabrics or the way that they looked, the styles and things like that. So they also weren't universally derided by their wearers. A lot of the loudest voices against corset wearing were people who never wore corsets.
They were popular with men too in Versailles.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that is true. So there was a group that
The
did.
LUEEs.
Yeah, they certainly did. But by and large, across different cultures and countries, they were worn largely by women. But they weren't universally hated.
I think another misconception about corsets is that there were no fat people who wore corsets.
Right.
It's just that our society does not prioritize saving and sharing those images.
Well, yeah, and it's just this collective amnesia over the fact that different body sizes have always existed. So we only think of super thin people of every era, despite the fact that that's never been true. So, yeah, everybody who would have been considered someone who should wear a corset wore a corset. They just did. And again, they could always find one in their size because they made it for the person.
Yeah.
Right? There was no Walmart to walk into back then. So anyway, as a person who's never worn a corset, maybe will one day, but I don't know. I thought it was very interesting. And especially to open it up and to say, you know what? Again, like most things, not universally bad, not universally good. Just a thing that you need to know about.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks.
Historical underwear is always very fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't be wearing your corset against your skin, too.
Yeah.
You had a chemise underneath, usually.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. These corsets were made with good material.
And you didn't want to have to wash them.
Yes.
Probably wouldn't turn out so well, I imagine. Especially if you have reed in it. That's going to be the end of your corset. Well, maybe not, but it's not going to be as good.
Yeah. Best not to do it. All right, Jim.
So I'm going to talk about the French disease.
En français.
Don't you mean the Italian disease?
I do indeed. We're getting ahead of ourselves. That's right, we're talking about syphilis.
Woo.
So why is it called the French disease? Did it originate in France?
No.
Is it perhaps a dig at that country's laissez-faire attitude toward monogamy, or their acceptance of sex work? Or
Maybe.
perhaps just a way to disparage a national enemy, whatever the reason?
Always.
Well...
Is it because they had a free press?
Is it because they like to behead the bad kings?
Sorry, we've heard this story too many times.
The first historical syphilis outbreak, as Ashlyn was alluding to, in Europe, dates to the Italian city of Naples in the late 15th century, at a time when Italy was being invaded by France. Many of the French troops who contracted syphilis in Italy then spread it through France and beyond in Europe as they returned home. So, as Ashlyn said, perhaps it should be called the Italian disease.
I was also making a joke about how, like, basically every country just calls it a different... I didn't actually remember that Italy was the originator. I was just picking a different country.
Yep.
Yeah, somewhere it's the Spanish disease.
Many of these
Somewhere.
countries will label each other. French disease is the most common.
Gotcha.
But perhaps we should call it the Neapolitan disease. Delicious. But again, not so fast. Like the so-called Spanish flu, the French disease probably originated on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Syphilis was unknown in Europe prior to contact with the New World, and most historians agree that it came to Europe via the Columbian Exchange. That said, it is closely related to several other treponemal infections that are endemic to Africa and South America. So it's its origins are not perfectly clear, and there are alternate theories proposing origins in Europe or Africa based on examination of skeletons and artwork from before contact with the New World. But these contentions are today considered fringe and are generally not accepted.
So like your pee, the history is cloudy.
Oh.
It's a syphilis joke.
Well, okay.
We can delete that, Aura. Thank you.
I mean, really a chlamydial or maybe a gonococcus. Anyway, we'll get into this.
Of course we will.
We're not going to touch on the infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiment in this segment. We did briefly discuss it way back on episode 128, Real Conspiracies. So feel free to flip back to that episode if you're interested, or just hit up the Wikipedia page. It is one of many stains on the 20th century history of medicine. But as usual, this is kind of an ass-backwards segment because the misconceptions that I'd like to address originally were kind of buried somewhere in the middle. And I'm probably going to ramble for a bit.
There was no pause. He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one had a chance to interrupt. It was really quite hypnotic.
So first, real quick, this segment was Ashlyn's idea. They had
Wow.
Whoa!
this right under the bus.
How's the undercarriage treating you?
Love it down here.
They had recommended I talk about STIs, and specifically the myth that sexually transmitted diseases can't be cured, or which ones can be cured. So let's start there. Are sexually transmitted infections curable?
Sacre bleu! What a foolish question!
It depends. They're not all the same.
Let's do a lightning round. Everybody, I want you to name an infection, and I'll tell you what it is and whether we can cure it.
Gonorrhea.
Yes, it's caused by the bacterium Neisseria gonorrhoeae. A single intramuscular injection of 250 milligrams of ceftriaxone will do the trick.
That sounds painful.
IM injections are fine. You get them all the time for vaccinations. What else? We've got gonorrhea.
HPV.
No. Human papillomavirus is viral. We can't really cure it, but it's usually asymptomatic depending on what strain of HPV we're talking about. So human papillomavirus, or HPV, causes most common viral warts, like a plantar wart, for example. It can also cause condylomata acuminata, or genital warts, but it is perhaps most famous these days for being the cause of the cancers that we can vaccinate against, cervical and penile cancer, cervical cancer being much more common. So get your Gardasil or whatever other brand HPV vaccination. It vaccinates against the strains of HPV that cause cervical cancer.
Chlamydia.
Because everybody knows Q-tips are soft.
Yes, that is Chlamydia trachomatis. It's a bacterium. Swallow a single gram of azithromycin and you're cured.
A single gram.
What else? We haven't talked about syphilis yet.
Well, you're going to talk about it at length, so.
Okay, fair enough.
So let's start that.
How about, well, we haven't even discussed.
HIV!
Okay, HIV, interesting one. Obviously, viral, human immunodeficiency virus. No, we can't really cure it, although with vertical transmission, if you hit it really hard in congenital HIV, passed from mother to a newborn, there has been at least one recorded case of a child being cured of HIV right away. There are potential cures in the works, but right now we can't cure it, but we can make it, we have really good treatment to the point at which it is essentially like you have a normal immune system. And of course, hepatitis is another big one, which is actually multiple diseases. There's hepatitis A, B, and C, and there's also two other hepatitis that we don't talk about as often.
Titties.
I was just like, who's going to make that joke?
Despite being viral infections, most types of hepatitis are curable these days. So A, B, and C are the ones we normally talk about. A is not really a sexually transmitted disease. It's transmitted by the fecal-oral route, so it can be sexually transmitted. And it is curable with a single dose of the hepatitis A vaccine administered within 2 weeks of contact with the disease. For several viral illnesses, if you get vaccinated really quickly, then it is curative.
You give your immune system enough instructions that they can head it off at the pass.
Hepatitis B, that's the only really truly sexually transmitted infection of the hepatitis of the lot. It's both sexually transmitted and blood-borne. It is not usually curable, but it can be treated with antivirals. And in young, healthy folks, a 48-week, it's a long course, 48-week course of interferon alpha is often enough to render them asymptomatic. It's basically a serologic cure, and they have very low risk of progressing to liver cirrhosis. In older individuals or those already with cirrhosis, they often require a multi-year or even indefinite course of tenofovir or entezavir. Hepatitis C...
Is there a word that normal people would know that those medicines are called?
Antivirals.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of antivirals.
Anything with a veer at the end is an antiviral.
Yes. And then hepatitis C, which is arguably not really an STBBI. It's blood-borne infection. Despite being viral, it is now curable in most patients with new antiviral therapies. Acute infections may be spontaneously cleared by the body. A lot of time, they will develop into chronic hepatitis C, but with appropriate antiviral treatment, it can be cured.
Hooray!
Also, interesting to note, if you do have hepatitis, you don't need to avoid Tylenol. This is mostly a myth. A lot of people think, oh, well, Tylenol is processed by the liver. I've got this liver infection. I shouldn't take Tylenol. It's true you need to be careful. Generally speaking, 4 grams per day, 4,000 milligrams per day of Tylenol, which is 8 extra strength Tylenol or 12 regular strength Tylenol. That is your maximum daily dose for a person with a fully functional liver. If an adult doesn't have a fully functional liver, like if they have hepatitis, have that. Just
talk to your own medical
talk to your own. Yeah, this is not medical advice. Excuse me. This is not medical advice. Big blaring sign. I'm not your doctor.
All right, Jem, tell us about syphilis.
Oh, we didn't even talk about herpes.
No, sorry.
That'll come back.
Lauren.
That was amazing.
Okay. Pop quiz. We've got HSV1, herpes simplex virus 1, herpes simplex virus 2. Which of them is the genital herpes virus?
2?
It's 1, right?
Trick question. It's both of them.
I mean,
right.
Traditionally, HSV2
have been migrating.
However, oral genital contact exists, and they can both infect both locations. Luckily, we do have acyclovir and valcyclovir, which can prevent transmission and really suppress. But you don't really get rid of them. Okay, now, we don't really talk about STDs anymore, sexually transmitted diseases, or STIs. We use the word STBBI, the initialism, sexually transmitted and blood-borne infections, mostly because they can be blood-borne. Lots of reasons. Also kind of stigmatizing. Similarly, we don't talk about AIDS anymore because it's been a stigmatizing diagnosis, and also because most people in North America who are HIV positive are extremely comprehensively treated and thus simply do not have an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome.
Yeah, they don't actually get AIDS anymore.
Yeah, because the highly effective antiretroviral therapy suppresses the disease so completely that they have normal immune function, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
A person diagnosed with HIV today in North America has pretty much an unaltered life expectancy. So, STBBI, any infection that can be transmitted through sexual contact or bodily fluids. In general, let's talk about prevalence. In general, Canada's 3 northern territories, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, have the highest rates of sexually transmitted and blood-borne infections, which is largely attributable to socioeconomic factors. Among the 10 provinces, Which province has the highest rate of sexually transmitted and blood-borne infections?
Alberta.
Ours.
Manitoba.
Oh yeah. Woo,
Yep.
baby, we're number one.
And for some infections, we outrank some or maybe all of, I don't know if there's any of them where we outrank all of the territories, but most of them. So we don't have easy access to prevalence data, just incidence data. I have a note here to explain the difference, but everybody's rolling their eyes and yawning, so I'm going to move on.
Lies.
So, in Manitoba, the most recent data we have is from 3 years ago. So, chlamydia, our rate of new cases is 473 cases per 100,000 people per year.
Wow.
So, that's 0.5% of Manitobans will be diagnosed with chlamydia each year. Gonorrhea, 182 new cases per 100,000. So, that's 0.2% of Manitobans will get gonorrhea in a year. Infectious syphilis, 126 new cases per 100,000, so 0.1% of the population will get syphilis in any given year. And and that is infectious syphilis, that's not endemic syphilis or congenital syphilis, just to be clear. Not that anybody cares. And HIV is about 12 new cases per 100,000, or 0.01% of the population. Manitoba also does have the highest rate of congenital syphilis in Canada. So that's syphilis where babies are born with it through vertical transmission from their parent. We just talked about herpes. In North America, what do you think the prevalence of herpes is? Let's start with HSV2. What's the prevalence of HSV2?
It's impossible to tell.
It's very hard. But
Like a majority of the population or something?
Yeah, 'cause it's chickenpox too, right?
for HSV2, the traditionally associated with genital infection, 16% of the North American population is HSV2 positive. For HSV1, fully 2/3 of the North American population has HSV. Human papillomavirus, impossible. That one's definitely impossible to know. HPV, we don't know, because almost everybody is totally asymptomatic. So, we're talking about syphilis.
Cancer.
Yeah. We're talking about syphilis. Syphilis.
Are we getting to the misconceptions?
We have covered them. Some of them.
Oh, I love how he's like, I'm going to throw two in here so I can just talk for a while
Okay.
and hope they don't notice.
So, syphilis is interesting for a lot of reasons. It's caused by spirochetes. Spirochetes are fun. They're the spiral-shaped bacteria. Borrelia is another spirochete. It's what causes...
No, that's a pasta brand.
Yeah.
You're getting them confused.
Well done. You having the same joke too.
That's excellent. Anyway.
Don't get bitten by ticks, folks. So, syphilis is... We primarily think of it as a sexually transmitted infection, but there are multiple endemic non-sexually transmitted infections that are caused by other subspecies of Treponema pallidum, including Begel, Pinta, and yaws, which are all various types of...
I feel like I've heard of yaws.
That's a
before.
golf thing. I think. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
a yaw is
It's-
when it goes to the... Yeah, it doesn't matter. One way, if it goes the wrong way, it's a yaw, and the other way is a slice.
Yes. So, syphilis is one of the many diseases called the Great Imitator because it can present so many different ways. The first time you're infected, you have primary syphilis, okay? That typically presents with a single painless sore called a chancre that is located on either the labia or on the shaft of the penis, typically. It is also, there's usually some regional lymphadenopathy. So lymph nodes in the area, usually in the inguinal region, in the folds near the legs. Those are
so many unnecessary words.
inflamed. Okay, fine. There's also secondary syphilis. So if after the primary infection, it's not cured, syphilis will at some point progress to secondary syphilis, which is like a disseminated systemic infection. So not just like a local infection. Goes throughout your body, causes rash, fever, like flu-like symptoms, can also cause hepatitis. It can cause hair loss, alopecia. It can also go to like an early latent period where it just sort of goes dormant. In this case, it's totally asymptomatic, but serologic testing, if you get a blood test, it can still be detected. The Primary and secondary occur in the first year of the infection. Okay? During these stages, it is easily curable.
Tertiary, however.
Once it gets to late syphilis, which is tertiary syphilis, it is less curable. So patients with tertiary syphilis have like what's called gummatous disease. So their skin, they start forming these big granulomas, like collections of granular tissue under the skin.
So like lumps. They get lumps.
They get these big lumps. They're called gummas.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome.
And these can form in the skin, in the bone, or in the viscera. They
Organs.
can disrupt the teeth. Thank you. Yeah. And
Just who is your audience, Jem?
I know.
Who is our audience?
I'm so
You're not
sorry.
talking to your fellow students.
Yeah. You've got excellent content. We're just keeping it real.
Okay. In the tertiary stage, it can also go latent, just like in the primary and secondary stages. And then at any point in either the primary or so the tertiary stage, the late stage, is where you would get these saddle nose deformities, or people's noses, if it gets extremely extensive, can come off. Teeth can fall out.
The nose thing, is that those lumps, like granular tissue that you were talking about growing on the nose, or is that just completely separate? Like, is it something about the cartilage?
Yeah, so the cartilage begins to break down because of the infiltration of the skin in this granulomatous stage. So that occurs in tertiary. Now, at any point in any of these stages, you can also get neurosyphilis.
When does it hit the brain?
Yeah, so it can hit the brain early or late. And it can cause meningitis, so inflammation of the lining of the brain and spinal cord. It can cause strokes, vision, hearing loss. It can also cause something terrible called tabes dorsalis, where there's like, you have this blinding nerve root pain that is triggered with anything that causes an increase in pressure in the cranium. So like if you cough or sneeze or laugh, you just get this blinding pain. Yeah, it sucks. So
this was a misconception that I had. I thought tertiary syphilis was when it hit the brain and that was it. Like I thought it was a stages up the body.
And that's what we used to think, but it's actually now being demonstrated that you can get neurosyphilis even in the primary or second. Like,
so if you just get
maybe
real
not
unlucky.
primary, but when you're in the secondary stage, you can still get it. Nowadays, they don't tend to go primary, secondary, tertiary as much. They tend to go early, which is what we used to call primary, secondary, and late. And you can get it early or late.
Okay, so my grade 11 health class presentation that I gave was incorrect.
It turns out it was slightly less detailed than what you're learning here.
All those people who were counting on that information and let them know that they need to update their info.
They're mostly dead.
Okay.
So.
Well, clearly they didn't listen.
Let's talk treatment. How do you treat syphilis?
Penicillin.
Antibiotics.
Well, if you're living in medieval Europe.
Leeches.
Yeah.
Pray.
Yeah. Or I guess post Columbian Exchange Europe. You, of course, use mercury.
Woo!
Awesome.
Of
course. What don't you use mercury for?
Yeah, so this is our final myth that syphilis is not treatable. Of course, the answer is you can use mercury.
But I guess it depends on what your outcome is after. If you don't care if your brain functions, sure, use the mercury. That's fine.
So
quick question: who invented the thermometer with the mercury inside?
I don't remember actually.
Ready?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have gotten that right at trivia. I figured you would know it.
Oh, was that?
It was Daniel Fahrenheit.
No!
Okay.
No way!
Yeah, that makes sense.
That other team knew the answer, didn't they?
I genuinely thought you were just going to whip that off and it would be really impressive. Sorry, I thought I was setting you up for a good moment.
No, that's totally fine. That fell out the brain at some point. So mercury was used to treat skin infections since the 14th century in Europe, and primary syphilis and tertiary syphilis both present like skin infections, right? Primary syphilis has this chancre, this painless sore, and then tertiary syphilis has these big gummas.
And I had...
So, Mercury does have some bactericidal properties, especially when applied topically, that is, spread on the skin lesion. It is less useful when drunk or inhaled, and much more toxic. Surprise, surprise. It is not an effective treatment for syphilis. I'm sorry to have lied to you. It is, in fact, extremely poisonous. Though, because of its bactericidal effects, mercury is sometimes used as a preservative in some vaccines, as we've discussed before, in the form of thimerosal, though it is not currently used in any scheduled vaccines in Manitoba. One advantage that mercury has over colloidal silver is, of course, that it won't turn you blue. What will it turn you instead?
Dead?
Yes, also pink. It's called acrodynia.
Trans rights.
What's that?
Heavy metal poisoning says trans rights. You can
Heavy
turn
metals
yourself
for trans
blue
rights.
or pink.
Yeah, and then you dye your face white with belladonna.
Oh, God.
Oh my god.
Or arsenic, right?
Arsenic.
Yeah,
arsenic.
little
There we
arsenic
go.
powder, you just get it, yeah.
All sorts of great medical non-advice on this podcast.
All sorts of medical bullshit on this podcast.
Yes.
So, syphilis now is extremely treatable, even curable, especially in the early stages, because it is highly susceptible to penicillin. Primary or secondary syphilis, so early syphilis, can be cured with a single dose of intramuscular penicillin G, or benzathine benzyl penicillin. We call it Pen-G. 2.4 million units right in that deltoid, and you're cured.
Mm-hmm.
Other treatments are available for those with allergies to penicillin, including ceftriaxone and tetracycline antibiotics, though...
Tetracycline sucks. Take it from somebody who's allergic to penicillin.
Yes. Tetracycline, doxycycline, all of the tetracyclines do tend to suck. They are also less effective at curing syphilis.
How come syphilis is still, as you say, highly susceptible to penicillin, whereas everything else has become much less?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Often this will be because of slower mutation rates or longer in-host periods. I'm not a virologist. Not that a virologist would be helpful because we're talking about a bacterium. I'm not an infectious disease expert of any kind, but when diseases spend more time in a single host, they have longer life cycles. They tend to change more slowly. In other cases, there are a variety of changes in pressures, but I really don't know. Regardless, it's nice.
That's nice to know.
Yeah,
so
refreshing.
so that could be a misconception. There's the basic and the OG antibiotic.
Yep.
Will still do you good for the most part.
There are a few diseases where we still use not just a beta-lactam like penicillin, but we literally use just penicillin for them, and syphilis is one of them.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so super curable, one dose in the early stages.
Yep.
How about the late stages?
Don't let it go to your brain.
Oh, yeah. So late stage, you need that 2.4 million units. You need 3 doses once a week for 3 weeks. That'll usually do the trick. And then if it gets to the brain, neurosyphilis.
I'm insane in the membrane. Insane in the membrane.
You need 3 to 4 million units, and you need it every 4 hours through IV, not in the muscle, directly into the vein. 3 to 4 million units every 4 hours for about 2 weeks.
So say for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And that provides serologic cure, but it does not reverse neurological damage that has already happened, unfortunately. So, as usual, 28 grams of prevention is worth 454 grams of cure.
Oh. Go on.
So, use barrier prophylaxis. Use a condom, for God's sake.
Does a condom really weigh 24 grams?
No,
he was doing metric ounce of.
Oh, fuck. I thought you were making a condom joke initially, but I was like, there's no way it weighs 24 grams.
No, he is being pedantic, as always.
Oh, I thought he was being funny. I'm sorry.
He can't be both.
Easy mistake to make. Vaccines for syphilis are in development, but none are currently available. They're in animal trials. And after treatment, please avoid sexual contact with anyone until all chancres are healed. Okay? Once they're gone, then you're good to go.
Sorry, you said after treatment?
Yeah. So
Okay,
after you've got
sorry,
that,
I blanked for a moment. I'm like, I want to make sure I heard that right.
after you've got the treatment, wait until any sores that you have are gone, and then you're good.
Awesome.
That's syphilis.
Thank you. Side misconception, I think, in there that you brought up. Only viruses can be prevented with vaccines.
That's a very good point. We actually, in the childhood vaccine schedule here in Manitoba, we have several non-viral vaccines, including our pneumococcal vaccines against certain forms of quite ugly bacterial pneumonia.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't think that just because something is a bacterial infection, there can't possibly be a vaccine, because more and more there can be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hopefully syphilis one day.
Hopefully.
Condoms cannot exceed 0.085 grams each.
This is a requirement?
I found an NIH website that lists different requirements for condoms, and apparently each, 20 condoms cannot weigh more than 1.7 grams.
Huh.
What a interesting thing.
Yeah. I have not looked into this further. Maybe I misunderstood it.
But you know what? You, dear listeners, go figure that out and give us your comments. Give us your feedback.
How much does a condom weigh? Get back to us, listeners.
Well, thank you, Jim.
0.085? Or 0.85 grams?
Listen, I'm bad at math. 20 condoms cannot exceed 1.7 grams.
Wow.
Right?
I mean, not the packaging.
Well, I guess...
Okay, someone's going out to buy a box of Trojans and figure this out.
I guess
they really don't weigh much.
230 condoms of prevention is worth 454 grams of
Have you ever tried to
cure.
weigh out a gram of salt, though? It's not very much. You can make a big pile of salt for a gram.
I was not a drug dealer, Ashlyn. I am a good boy.
Neither was I. I had to take fucking chemistry where you have to calculate things and nearly failed out of university.
Oh yeah, I didn't do that until I was well into my 30s.
Terrible.
All right, bring us down, Lauren.
Ready for some more bummers? Sometimes I feel like John Oliver with a worse writing staff.
Cool.
Ashlyn and I had a few laughs during our federal election this year about the absolute misconceptions of Canadian politics that we saw on American media. I think we talked about it on an episode. No, we didn't elect a prime minister.
How dare you? We would never.
And nobody called a snap election any time in the last many years.
No, they have no concept of an election cycle that doesn't last 2.5 years.
When we decided to do this episode about misconceptions, my mind went exactly to these thoughts. Both Americans and Canadians have misconceptions about the similarities in our systems, legal, political, and social. Not a small chunk of Canadians know more about American systems than our own, simply due to the prevalence of American television. The biggest misconception is that Canada is a country at all. It's a corporate state built upon the continued systemic abuse and disenfranchisement of the Indigenous people and nations for the proliferation of colonizers and the destruction of the environment.
Yeah,
3 companies in a trench coat.
I took that line out.
Wait, which is the third? No, because you got the Northwest, you got the Bay.
Bell.
What's that?
Bell.
Bell? Oh, yeah. Okay, I was going to say CN or something like that. But I like that. 3 companies.
Yeah.
I love that image. It's amazing.
It's not
so
my
true.
line at all.
No.
Yeah.
It's amazing, though. I love it.
So none of this is going to factor into the rest of my segment, but if I did not say it right up the top, I would have exploded. I'm going to discuss a few misconceptions about how the Canadian federal system and elections differ from the American system. These misconceptions may not be held by my co-hosts or our astute listeners, but hopefully someone learns something. Next time, I promise I'll do a fun one again. Remember my misconception segment about taste buds? That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I had a whole rant about misconceptions about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but that's its own section for another episode. I edited.
More content.
We'll start with the Prime Minister. As I said at the start, the misconception that kicked off this segment was how the 2025 Canadian election was discussed by Americans. I saw several news segments congratulating Canadians on the election of your new Prime Minister. So that's not true. We don't elect a Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is an elected member of Parliament who also happens to be the leader of the party who has the most number of seats in the House of Commons. Mark Carney was elected by the people in the Nepean riding, which comprises a part of the city of Ottawa. He sits 11 seats from the Speaker's chair in the front row of the House of Commons. If he has lost his riding, he would have to resign the Liberal Party leadership, and members of the party would have had to elect a new leader who would then have been named Prime Minister.
Unless some other dude gave up his seat for him.
Which is usually what happens.
Generally, but he still needs to then be elected into that seat.
Yeah,
so
has to
should
be
they
elected.
fail, should that member of parliament fail to be elected into that other seat, then they need to do the whole thing again. And at that point, the party's like, yeah, you're done.
Yeah, not you.
Unless you're the Conservatives.
There is no Vice Prime Minister. Currently, we don't even have a Deputy Prime Minister who would take over should Carney be unable to hold the role or his seat.
I wasn't aware of that.
The last one was Christina Freeland.
And he didn't appoint one.
Not yet. You don't have to have one.
Yeah, you don't have to have one. It is really funny, too, how
That
it's...
was a misconception I had.
The fact that it's called a Deputy Prime Minister rather than a Vice Prime Minister or whatever. Deputy just sounds so like quaint and childlike.
Like,
Deputy dog.
Yeah, sheriff's deputy, you know, the little guy that's like, I can help.
I can help.
Editorially, I do see how this misconception happens. Like the American system, Canadian politics has been moving more towards cults of personality around the party leaders rather than focusing on the party platforms.
Driven largely by the Conservatives, but Liberals are not far behind.
No. Not that our leaders have been good about upholding any of the platforms they campaigned on. Remember when we were going to get rid of first past the post?
Oh, yeah.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
I would say, sure, yeah, the Conservatives are definitely guilty of it. I feel like the biggest cult of personality most recently was probably around Trudeau, the early days, because he was the scion of one of our most famous prime ministers of the past.
And when I do my segment about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, there is a lot of Trudeau in there.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
But let's move on to the parties. Canada officially, quote unquote, has 5 parties with a shot at getting seats in the House of Commons, opposed to the 2-party system in the States.
LOL.
Other parties also exist. The big 5 are the Conservatives, the far right, the Liberals, who are center-right, the New Democratic Party, who is center sort of right, the Bloc Québécois, which is center-right but focused on Quebec sovereignty, and the Green Party, which is in the center. Official sources will shift these leanings of each party to the left, but I'm being realistic.
I would call the NDP, center. I would say the very slightly left of center.
Yeah, very.
I don't know. I feel like, oh hell, they're way far right of me and you and all of us, but
ideals versus actions as well.
Yeah, like it depends on your Overton window, your frame of reference, whatever. But
they propose left center and they end up doing nothing.
Yeah, sure.
It's hard.
Who knows how they would govern? They've never done it.
There are other parties, like the Centrist Party, the People's Party. That sounds good, but they're super far right.
Yeah, never them. Not the Purple Party. Never vote the Purple Party.
No, the Purple Party is like out and out fash.
Yeah. There's the Marxist-Leninist Party, the former Reform Party. Ask me about Preston Manning some days. And no, don't do it, Laura.
we all heard this hour has 22 minutes. Like
air farce.
It was air farce. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Of course it was air farce. Yeah.
Of course it was. I won't for you.
Vote reform, and I promise no one will ever again attempt to slip you the French tongue.
And finally, there's also the Rhinoceros Party.
We have a rhinoceros party?
We did.
Almost every country has a rhinoceros party.
No.
An MP can also declare themselves independent at any time they're in the House of Commons, or they can actually cross the floor. Not a euphemism. They actually walk across the floor and become a member of another party.
Are there extra seats? Like, where do they sit? Do they just stand?
No, they scooch over. And I mean, right now, the Liberals are...
Carry their chair, or...?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. I guess they're benches or something.
Yeah, it's called backbenchers for a reason, because there's actual benches at the top of the House of Commons.
Oh, that sounds so uncomfortable.
I'm saying party a lot. The party with the most MPs is the ruling party, whose leader becomes prime minister, and the one with the second most becomes the official opposition. Parties can also form coalitions with each other to get a larger voting bloc. A ruling party is currently considered a majority when it has 172 of the 343 current seats. If the ruling party has less than 172, they're considered a minority government and have to make some of those coalitions right quick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Only a couple more sections. Voting! Once you get past the infuriating ID checks and a cheerful senior citizen poll official making sure you're on the list, by crossing you off on the paper copy of your riding in front of them,
Yep.
Canadian ballots are very simple. There's one alphabetical list of candidates for your MP with their party affiliations written beside. You go behind a cardboard stand, you put an X and only an X.
No, it can be any symbol, as long as it's clear that you are marking the thing as per my latest Elections Canada training.
That is true. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So you can happy face it.
Whatever you want, as long as it's on one thing and one thing only.
Can you squeeze derogatory statements into there?
I would probably accept that.
What if you write not this one in the square?
That is voting.
That is voting for them.
Oh no!
Jem, you've messed up so many ballots.
Oh, that's why Carney was elected.
So you put your mark in the circle beside your preferred candidate. Thank you, Ashlyn, for reminding me of when we did our election training. And you fold up your ballot, hand it back to the poll official, who will tear off a strip from the ballot number that they have written down beside your name on that paper list, and then they will hand it back to you, and you have to put it in the voting box. They cannot do it for you.
It is extremely funny how archaic it still is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
They're
approve.
ritualized.
Every year, just watching them move their ruler down the list.
The official ruler.
It
was fun to do. Ashlyn and I have both been poll officials.
Sure.
We're not senior citizens, but we had the day off.
Senior citizens in spirit.
I would do it if I had the day off, but I'm just don't take the day off.
And for our American listeners, this might shock you. Depending on the line, to get to your polling place, it takes between 5 minutes and an hour.
Yeah, it's usually very quick.
Yeah.
It's usually empty in there when I've gone to vote recently.
And also, Canadians don't vote on ballot measures. If a law or decision requires a direct citizen input, Prime Minister can call a referendum, where only the two options on the little paper are yes and no.
And the last one was in 93? Was that 93, 95, wasn't it?
Yeah, we're not going to get into that.
I'm just saying it
No.
happens infrequently.
Very
Like,
infrequently.
even though it's something that can happen, it doesn't happen
It was-
often.
Is that a national referendum?
Yeah,
it was 96, actually.
It was 96, okay.
Because it was happening the same time as the OJ trial.
Okay.
I remember all of those signs because I had family living in Quebec at that time.
Let's move on to governance. Canada is a constitutional monarchy for some goddamn reason. That means our head of state is the King of England, Cy, who appoints his representative, the Governor General, from among the newscasters and astronauts of Canada.
That was excellent. Oh my god, that's an amazing line. Thank you.
Favorite thing of mine I wrote today. The first Governor General was appointed in, anybody? What year?
I don't know.
1541. To oversee the colonization of New France.
That makes sense.
Wow, okay.
In 2021, Mary Simon, so we've had them since 1541. In 2021, Mary Simon became the first Indigenous person appointed to the role. Today, the Governor General gives speeches at open parliamentary sessions, gives bills royal assent, and hands out awards.
Yeah. They have a lot of ceremonial power.
And a rubber stamp for the things that are important.
Yeah.
Where the U.S. has a bicameral legislature with an elected House of Representatives and an elected Senate, Canada has a unicameral legislature with an elected House of Commons and a Senate appointed by the Prime Minister. Senators are appointed for life if they so choose, up to the mandatory retirement age of 75. Each province has a set number of senators, and the territories are allowed...
1?
One each.
Yeah, it's not like we should give the people in the North rights and a say or anything.
The American system has 3 branches of government, and Canada has 1. This is based on the British system called responsible government, where the executive is responsible to the Parliament, known, as I was saying, the House of Commons. House of Commons has the 343 elected MPs right now. They meet daily when government is in session, which is about 26 weeks a year, I believe, for question period, where they discuss bills, issues, and take pot shots at each other. Provincial premiers are allowed for question period and are encouraged to be present for their province, backed up, hopefully, by their MPs. In the States, the president and cabinet members are not allowed to appear in the House without a formal invitation. The U.S. was founded as a decentralized federation of states where Canadian history emphasized a more centralized federal system for its provinces. So let's go on to the cabinet. Like the States, Canada's federal cabinet is appointed by the Prime Minister. Unlike the States, where the president can appoint unelected vaccine conspiracists and wrestling executives to his cabinet, in Canada the cabinet is drawn from elected MPs. And
wives of wrestling executives.
She's an executive in her own right.
Okay. Sorry, I forgot about the nepotism.
Yeah. His whole family. They're all horrible.
I don't know if you're going to think ill of me, but I enjoy destroying lives.
In Canada, the cabinet is drawn from elected MPs, and they are given portfolios like Minister of Fisheries or Minister of Trade. Prime Minister is allowed to assign any portfolio they want to the cabinet members, or not. Mark Carney did not appoint a minister for the rights of women, for example.
Who needs that? It's only 50% of the population. It's barely a majority.
Don't they already have enough rights?
Yeah. And fun fact, being this is often a political move and a way to get back at people when suddenly you get a very fancy portfolio given to you or taken away at the drop of a hat. I'm sorry to step on your segment.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to say, that's my next paragraph. He has the ability to assign an unassigned cabinet as they see fit. There's generally a cabinet shuffle every year. And as Laura said, you can usually tell if a minister has fallen out of favor if they are removed from a cabinet position instead of just getting a new one. Because normally he has those favorites, and then they shuffle them around.
Yeah.
That's how we knew there was going to be an election this last time, because Christina Freeland lost her cabinet position.
Well, that and other things.
Yeah. Well, that was the final writing on the wall.
Yes.
So for my conclusion, I didn't even get into non-confidence votes or campaign laws. How does a 6-week campaigns and set spending limit sound?
And I mean, it's better than the alternative.
Whatever deity might exist.
And I didn't get into the makeup and role of the provincial legislatures or the roles of the provinces, so thankfully. I can sense myself getting very, very cynical, especially at how continually disappointed I am in Mark Carney. The day we're recording this, the Senate rubber-stamped Bill C-5, which grants extraordinary powers to the Prime Minister. Senators spoke about how they were getting calls and emails, including from me and a lot of people, begging them not to do it, but they did it anyway.
See, and that is one thing too. Like, I don't know if this is a misconception among Canadians, but Americans whose Senate actually does something, our Senate does nothing. They are useless. Half of them don't show up ever, or like 2 or 3 days a year. Like, it is
many of them
useless.
Live in the United States.
Yeah, yes. like this
Pamela
is just
Wallen.
a pension for life for them, and they just do whatever the House of Commons wants. So if you get like a real right wing kind of asshole conservative government in there, we're gonna get some bad. Yeah. I guess so.
It could be worse, Lauren.
It could be very much worse.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, Poilievre still has to get a seat. Okay.
No.
And let's hope that he doesn't, because this man doesn't deserve
it would be hilarious.
If he doesn't.
Yeah.
No, that is karma, man. Like, that is the only way things have to go.
I want to see him pumping gas somewhere. Pumping gas is a noble profession.
He a lawyer or some shit like that?
He became...
Oh, he's just like a professional politician?
Yeah, his first job was a politician.
I don't know what Milhouse did before he got on this stuff.
Not that there's... It's a noble profession.
So I just wanted to add a little aside here. I looked it up. Canada has had 3 total ever federal referendums.
Oh, wow.
One was prohibition. One was conscription. Ooh. And one was like, basically, do we rewrite our entire basis of governing our country, which was the third one.
Which was the one that would have allowed Quebec to become its own thing.
Right. And I guess it was a lot more about like what different categories of things were federal powers versus provincial powers. Yeah, I was pretty young when this happened.
Yeah, exactly. I remember it. I remember it. Like, I remember it talking about it a lot, but like in terms of like the actually ins and outs, and it's a lot of those things, even like when you hear about a lot of Supreme Court rulings in the US, I don't hear about as many as Canada, but the US, like sometimes the law is like, why this law? It's like, because this leads to this, which leads to that, which leads to the question that's being asked.
Yeah.
So until we deal with this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Only 3 ever things
ever.
that we've ever gotten to vote on as a country together.
Yeah.
And then Manitoba has held referenda, 3 ever, all of them about prohibition.
Well, there's nothing else to do here but drink and get syphilis, apparently.
So we're saying no booze. No, okay, let's vote again. Let's try that one again. Are we sure we don't want this? Okay, one more time.
So for the end of my segment, pop quiz. When was the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms enacted? When was it presented? In
1982.
voted in? Yes, correct.
I knew that one.
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is 1 month and 2 days younger than my brother,
Oh.
who is younger than me.
And the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that we have in Canada is kind of the equivalent of like your constitutional rights in the United States.
We talk about our charter rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get into that I have a whole segment written about that, so we'll get into that in another episode.
So we're doing politics on an upcoming episode. I think that's good. We haven't done that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Another thing we haven't talked about in a while is metal.
That's metal. In your lungs.
Ashlyn, would you like to tell us about cast iron?
Iron.
So a lot of people are intimidated out of cooking in or even saving really great cookware from the dumpster because there are so many misconceptions about its care and use.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that I would share some of the knowledge that I have garnered over the years. I am a human being who has used and abused cast iron for many years. I learned most of what I know about how to fix and maintain it from my spice. And I'm here today to regurgitate it for you from my brain.
Yay!
We actually used 2 cast iron pans this past weekend, and then I washed them.
First, all of these things are only going to be true of a properly seasoned and maintained piece of cast iron. The good news is that I will give you a guaranteed way to make this happen for you, as long as you follow the instructions to the letter, and you don't think they didn't mean that. I'm not going to do exactly what they said. I'm going to do something slightly different. No, wrong. Do what I say.
Do what Ashlyn says.
Okay. Number 1, if you get nothing else out of this segment, please understand that you can use soap in cast iron pans.
Hey!
Woo! The surface of your properly seasoned and maintained pan is made of a polymerized coating that used to be oil, but no longer is. It has been transformed by the magic of heat into a polymerized coating that is no longer oil, and you will not be able to wash it away with soap, I promise you.
Okay.
So wash your pans, and then do your pan maintenance every time. Again, I will tell you. Do what I say. Number 2. Many people will say that cast iron heats really evenly. That is incorrect. It heats extremely unevenly. However, if you let cast iron preheat long enough, it has so much heat conduction and reflection that it won't matter anymore. So if you preheat it enough and you maybe move it around a couple of times on your stovetop if you're doing it on the stove, it will get so hot that it won't matter that there are hot spots, essentially.
And you're supposed to preheat it at like top temperature, right?
That's not important. It just needs to get...
It just needs to get really hot.
I was saying that was
Or,
a
like,
misconception.
Good and hot.
Oh.
I don't put it above a 4.
No. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Cast iron will conduct heat about 1/3 to 1/4 as well as aluminum. So it doesn't actually... That aluminum will heat more evenly is what I'm saying. But it emits 9 times more energy. So aluminum is going to cook whatever is right against it, and cast iron is going to radiate that heat much further, penetrating more of the food that's in the pan.
So you're going to get less of the burn on the bottom and more of the thorough cook, whereas aluminum, especially if it would be thin, might do like more of the burn there, but not get the heat all the way up.
The heat will be all concentrated right on the bottom.
Yeah. Yes.
Can I ask a clarification?
Maybe.
Just based on my distant memory of
no guarantee I will understand.
Physics. So heat conduction versus heat capacity. So my recollection is that heat capacity is the amount of energy that the substance can hold. And so metals can have higher or lower heat capacities. And then heat conductance is the speed at which they can transmit that energy into whatever's next to them. So water, for example, has a high-ish heat capacity, so it can absorb a lot of energy before it transitions states, etc. But it doesn't actually often conduct that energy very quickly. So aluminum, one of the reasons that it is so, you can just have aluminum in the oven and you can just pull it off with your hands and you're fine, is because while it has high heat conductance, it doesn't actually have very high heat capacity. So as soon as you grab it, it'll transmit heat into you fast, but it doesn't actually hold that much heat.
Was there a question in there?
When you talk about the heat capacity of cast iron, you're talking about, sorry, the heat conductance, of cast iron. Are you talking about like the speed at which it transmits that energy? Or are you talking about the amount that it can actually hold, like the heat capacity?
I didn't use either of those words, I don't think. So the way that the science bit that I got from the Serious Eats issue on this says, stainless steel, said wrong, has an emissivity of...
Oh, massivity?
Emissivity.
Oh, emissivity, excuse me.
Emitting. Emitting energy.
Okay.
So stainless steel 0.07, cast iron 0.64.
I'm going to have to look up the difference between emissivity and conductance.
Yeah. So I don't...
Okay, sorry.
I don't know any more physics than that. Although I did get a bunch of physics questions at yesterday's trivia.
Ashlyn was a rock star in the physics category.
No, it was not that hard. Okay. So, preheat your cast iron. It's good for it. Good for you. Number 3. You can cook tomatoes in your cast iron. It's fine. Often you don't want to cook or store things that are very acidic in metal. For one thing, your metal is coated in polymerized oil.
Yay!
So it's not actually in contact with the metal if your pan is properly seasoned and maintained. And the acid isn't going to eat away your seasoning. You're fine. Don't simmer a tomato sauce in it for hours, perhaps. And don't let anything super acidic just sit in it for hours.
Okay.
But you can cook tomatoes, you can deglaze with wine, you can use a little lemon juice, you're fine.
All of these I do with our cast iron on the regular.
Number 4, cast iron is not just for meat. I love my cast iron for mushrooms, for corn, for onions, fried rice, potatoes, Brussels sprouts, pretty much anything that tastes good with like a little bit of char, which is almost everything. A searing hot cast iron pan is also the best alternative to like a really legit wok setup. Like if you don't have an actual like wok ring and a gas burner, the closest thing in the like ability to get a lot of heat onto your food very quickly and that little bit of like charry wok flavor is a screaming hot cast iron pan.
Especially over the barbecue.
Number 5, you can use your metal utensils in it. You are not going to gouge out the finish of your pan with a metal utensil unless you're really going at it.
Like repeated scraping, you'll start to get under it.
If you're doing it on purpose. Yeah.
Right.
If you are getting little chunks of black flakes coming off if you scrape your pan, you need to wash your pan with soap because that is carbonized food that you have not gotten off. That is not your seasoning. So yeah, my cast iron pans are the reason I have metal utensils. What else can you use them in?
Well, a lot of people will use them on nonstick, but
terrible.
You shouldn't do that.
Shouldn't use nonstick.
And if you do gouge your pan with like a metal spatula or something, good news, you can just start over. Because, final misconception, there's almost no such thing as an unsalvageable cast iron pan.
Yay!
If it doesn't have actual like holes or huge defects, like I've seen people take like grinders to them and make holes in them or cut them in half. Okay, fine. You've made it unsalvageable. Good for you.
Or if you've used it for like metal smelting.
We're getting there. And as long as the bottom is still relatively flat, with some of the thinner ones, you can abuse them with heat and cold cycles to the point where their bottoms will have bowed out and you can like spin them on a point. So that's something to check for if you're trying to buy a vintage one. And then the third really important thing is make sure that it hasn't been used to melt down lead. There's a surprising amount of ones that you can find at like vintage sales or whatever were found in barns and were once used to like melt down things for shot.
Okay.
So test that before you use it on food.
See Laura's segment about and lead poisoning.
Things I have gleaned from random Facebook posts about cast iron.
Oh my.
So if you've checked for those 3 things, no glaring holes, hasn't been used to melt down lead, bottom is still relatively flat, you can almost certainly salvage this thing. Lauren's parents were going to throw out a beautiful cast iron skillet that they had like left in the yard for several years or something, and it was completely just like orange with rust. And they were like, oh, we're gonna throw this out. We happened to be there and we're like, no, we will take that. So here's how to fix your pans or other stuff. I've done 2 Dutch ovens with the exact same method by starting over, and once you have fixed them, how to keep them fixed. This is not the easy way. This is the way.
The right way.
There is no easy way.
Right.
Number 1, strip the pan. We like to do this by getting the pan really, really ridiculously hot. Taking out all of your racks in the oven and running the self-clean cycle is a good way to do it. You can do it in a really hot campfire. It won't be as effective or as even.
I have done
You
that.
can also spray a whole can of Easy Off on it.
Outside.
Yes. After you have done one of those methods and let it cool off / get slightly less toxic, you want to take some stainless steel, or not stainless, steel wool, and just rub the shit out of it. This is the part that sucks the most, but it's surprisingly easy once the heat treatment has
once
happened.
you get something to break down that polymer, it's not so bad.
Yeah, it's not so bad to just rub out all the edges.
It's
and
really satisfying to
get all
see
the
too.
grooves. And it gets all shiny.
Yeah, the one time you want it nice and shiny.
Yeah. You get your pan all shiny and you get to start again.
Back to 1.
Now, using an unsaturated oil like canola, flax oil has often been recommended, but more research that I trust has said like it doesn't really matter, and we always have canola around. If you're Manitoban, you do too. Take like the smallest amount on a rag and just coat your whole item in oil. And then take a different clean rag and you take off all of the oil. You don't go, oh, there's this part's still shiny, but that's okay. I just oiled it. I'll leave that. No. Take off all of the oil that you can. Scrub all of the oil off of it. And then you get it hot. It will still have like the thinnest possible coating of oil, I promise. Get it to like 450 degrees in your oven for 30 to 45 minutes and then let it cool down.
Outside.
You have done 1 cycle. Oh no, I mean, if you're doing many pans like we did once in my mother's oven, we cycled them in and out of the oven and then like dumped them on the fire pit in between. That sucked. If you're doing 1 pan like a normal person, I would just let it cool off in the oven in between cycles. Just leave it alone. Don't touch it.
So this is probably a multi-day process.
Yeah, it is. So if you have 1 pan to do, you can do it in a day with like moderate attention every hour or so.
Okay.
Ashlyn had 2 ovens and what was it, like 6 or 7 pans at your mother's house?
And a couple of Dutch oven and all of our tools and stuff. And that took a day.
Dave and I were out scrubbing tent panels. And Ashlyn did the cast iron.
But anyway, so you've oiled it, you've taken the oil off, you've heated it up, you let it cool. Do that whole thing like 4 or 5 times. Each tiny layer is building up a layer of molecules of polymerization on your cast iron, making it nice and smooth, non-stick, essentially, and really protected. After however many cycles you feel, as soon as it's beautiful, go with your gut. Any excess oil on your pan is going to result in little like droplet patterns or stickiness.
Yeah.
So it really is a less is more situation. The more you can get off, the better a finish that you're going to get. Now, the part that we neglected for a long time and is still among the hardest part is to just keep up with it every time you use the pan. When you use your pan, just let it be greasy until you're ready to wash it. Don't let it sit in water. Right. Water is the enemy of iron, and grease is fine. So don't pre-soak it or whatever. Wash it with soap and water. Scrub out all the carbonized bits of food. Again, those are not your seasoning. dry it immediately, give it another coat and uncoat of the oil, and get it really hot again. It doesn't have to be in the stove again, but just get it hot so that everything on the stovetop, so that everything it has evaporated and starts to smoke again. And that's gonna just give you that extra layer of protection, make sure that all of the water is out and dry it off.
Right.
And it makes it so that you don't have to do the whole seal wool process again.
Okay.
As long as you keep up with it.
Yeah. When I wash them, I use a natural fiber bristle brush. Javex makes them, and you can get them at the dollar store.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I clean it with. And not every time, but maybe every third or fourth time, I put the oil on it. Trying to be better about it, but
we're also not afraid to have to redo them every couple of years. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are a lifetime investment.
Yeah, it sounds like it is. It certainly would change the way that you might manage your kitchen, store things, like be ready to be able to put things away or something like that. So just to be aware that it is a different process entirely.
Don't put them away unless they're bone dry. Like, I make sure I dry them on a one on the stovetop for a while. We even have a cast iron rack where they are all separated so they're not stacked in each other, because I did that once and that was real bad and we had to do a fixed job.
Oh no.
Because I got rusty.
They had gotten put away, stacked, and damp. That was the problem. You can totally stack them together as long as they're dry.
Okay.
Like some people think that the finish is really fragile and is going to chip off, and that is not true at all.
Okay.
But you can ruin it. I have. So we have other ways now.
Yeah.
You can mostly ruin it with water, though, which I feel like is not the narrative that you hear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the soap piece and the scratching that are like that you're more likely to worry about.
And putting it in a dishwasher is a faux pas, but more because of the extended moistness than anything else.
Yeah.
And for us, we have a teeny tiny little apartment-sized dishwasher, so I'm not going to waste that much real estate on a pan that's easier to clean by hand.
We have a full size, and I rarely put pots and pans. Like, we don't have cast iron stuff that I use, but I rarely put pots and pans. Because again, when I could put 5 plates in a bowl in there, why would I put a pot?
Yeah. So I recommend cast iron. It's not that scary. Wash it with soap. Thank you.
Love that.
Excellent.
Thank you. And just to answer a question from earlier, emissivity and conductivity or conductance are similar related terms. Conductance or conductivity is the ability of a surface of one object to transfer its heat to another object in direct contact, whereas emissivity is an object's ability to transmit the energy that it holds, the heat, via thermal radiation.
Okay. So the aluminum or stainless steel is better at the first thing, and the cast iron is better at the second thing.
Yes.
That is what I read.
That sounds plausible.
Makes sense.
Yes, sure. We'll go with it. All right.
Excellent misconception debunking, everyone. Everyone have a lightning round, something nice?
I do.
Please.
I've been working on making a cube set, and I haven't finished etching, decorating, staining it, but all the blocks are in the right rough shape and like that. And I introduced the kids to it, and they were happy to play a couple, not full rounds, but
they were happy to throw things at the other things and knock them down.
Absolutely, too happy in some cases. And it was a nice, lovely time with the family.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I'm employed again.
Yay!
So far, it's working out well. I am feeding people again. I get to feed 30 people at a time instead of 100 plus, which is super my wheelhouse. And I'm looking forward to making our clients healthier.
Yay!
Working in conjunction with...
Yeah, it seems like Laura and I are going to get to do some actual collaboration over feeding people who need better diets.
Hooray! It
Excellent.
will be good.
This is so Winnipeg.
I do love that my one hunch was like, I only know of one place, like what you're describing. Is it this place? And you're like, why, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Winnipeg sometimes. It's great.
You've got a dietitian on call.
I was able to be like, hey, yeah, my boss was having a hard time getting a hold of the dietitian. And Laura goes, well, the dietitian is having a hard time getting a hold of the staff that are supposed to feed these people. Let's connect them.
It was great. It was wonderful. So fingers crossed it keeps working.
I think so. It will. Laura, do you have a...
Yeah, my something nice is our eldest child had her grade 6 grad this week.
Yay!
It is very exciting and just was a very lovely little ceremony, and the administration and staff at the school that our kids go to are fabulous, and
They certainly are.
they go above and beyond, and they're great. And it was just, we've known most of this class since they were 3 and 4 years old, and so it's just pretty cool. Yeah, it was lovely.
I didn't grow up in Manitoba. Is she going to middle school?
Middle school now.
Oh.
Yeah, out of elementary into middle school. So there'll be a whole new ball game come September. But for right now, we're just kind of basking in the glow of our big kid and the lovely friends that she's made along the way.
Yeah.
So do they have a school for only 7 and 8?
Not all schools. So the one she's going to is only 7 and 8. Most other middle schools have at least one other year in them. But this one is just in this area for whatever reason. All the elementary schools go up to 6 and the high schools start at 9. So that leaves 7 and 8.
Okay.
Very cool.
Weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but
Yeah. I mean, out in the country, we only ever had the option of K to 8 and then high school.
yeah, that's what I had too. Or in Transcona, where which was the division that I ended up in and that some of my friends went to, a bunch of the elementary schools were K to 4, and then the middle school was 5 to 8.
Interesting.
So it was more evenly split between the 3 levels of schooling. So yeah, but other schools are like 6 to 8 or 7 to 9 or something like that. So.
The school that she'll be going to used to be, before I went there, shortly before I went there, it switched from 7 to 9. And then Kelvin was 10 to 12. It switched to 7, 8. And then Kelvin went 9 to 12.
So
Very cool.
big things coming our way, but it was lovely.
Well, my congratulations to her.
Thanks.
My something nice is I'm down 1 organ.
Hooray!
I guess, was it 17 days ago? I had a hysterectomy. I've been waiting to have one for 30 years. And I am the kind of people that shouldn't tell their story of their healing from hysterectomy because it was miraculous and bonkers easy for me. So don't listen to my healing story.
Follow your care provider's advice.
Worst patient ever.
Easy for Lauren. Ashlyn is still reeling.
They came out and helped me pick Hascat berries day 2 after surgery.
I had a chair.
You refused to use it. You squatted several times.
Lauren!
There were berries at the bottom.
And you were
Worst
the only person
patient
who
ever.
could get them?
I
was
brought
on
you
that
a
side of the
chair
fence.
and I moved it every time you wanted to move and you kept getting out of it.
So I'm back to normal except when Ashlyn catches me. But it's been 30 years in desire for it and a long 2-year struggle after I found out that it would be medically necessary. So I'm glad it's gone.
Yay!
Bye. So
Hooray.
thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we
you.
cleared some things up for folks and we'll talk to you next month. Bye.
All right,
forward
have a
to
good
it.
night.
Night.
Show notes and references for all of our episodes are available at lueepodcast.com, where you can also find links to donate or get in touch. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is with a review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you found us, or by sharing this episode with a friend.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
Today's misconceptions include corsetry, crotch critters, Canada, and cast iron. It was the only
traditional 4 C's.
It was the only way I could get the C's in.
Crotch critters. Oh, gross.
I actually did not include any arthropod-based... Okay. Well, something for next time. Chastity belts. That's the one I wanted to talk about.
Really? Yeah.
It fits with their theme?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have time to put that together now.
You just watch me.
It is 10 p.m. as we begin to record this.
Yeah.
Just so you know, audience.
Not started talking.
Yeah, it's like before Fortnite got rid of building, you could shoot somebody from across the map, and before you know it, they had built a defensive structure before the bullet even arrived.
Take your word for it.
I know some of these words.
Let's just cut that out, Nora. That was
please.
a waste of everybody's time.
That's actually written in my note. The party with the most MPs is the ruling parter.
It's okay. We also got Laura talking to Snowflake
That's
here.
okay.